while GM and Hyundai both thought that they could rectify the bursting into flame thing with software updates, they couldn't.
The cells are generally taken out of the animal through a biopsy under anesthesia.
A code red for humanity, adding that it must be a death knell for coal and fossil fuels.
This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Hello and welcome to episode 76 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. Welcome to our weekly conversation about the latest in green tech and transportation. This week we have an exploration and explanation of the UN Climate Code Red report for humanity that came out last week. Going to delve a bit more into that. Blue hydrogen gets a black eye. Oil and gas may raise James's blood pressure once again. And GM issues a huge battery recall. I mean, this is basically, Brian, almost all the batteries in the world a few years ago are being recalled by GM now this week. So we'll get into that. How are you this week? It's cool. Summer's over, Brian. I'm sad.
Yeah, but I had a good kind of summertime road trip on the weekend when it was still too hot.
Right.
Now it's too cold. But yeah, I took a road trip in my Tesla to Winnipeg. I'd never gone in that direction before in the Tesla, so got to visit a couple of new Supercharger stations along the way. And it was a lot of fun. I love an electric road trip.
So what was good about it? You went last summer. You went to Vancouver in the other direction.
Yep.
From Saskatchewan here, where we are. Brian and I. Brian, you're in your bomb shelter. I'm in my bedroom in North Regina. We're still self-isolating due to COVID and due to laziness on my part for not going to the Stockton studios to record the podcast. Because, it's just environmental this way.
Sure.
Less gas. So tell me, what was it about your road trip that made it special? Was it just easy?
Yeah, it was just easy. There is always a concern, the Tesla Superchargers are occasionally down. They work 99.9% of the time. But, it would be a situation where if one of the stations was down, I might have been in trouble. But there's 3 Superchargers between here and Winnipeg. It's about a 6-hour drive. And we only needed 2 of them.
Really?
I have the standard range car. So, there was, in the nice summer weather, not a problem getting there with just 2 stops.
What speed did you drive at, roughly speaking?
About 115. The speed limit's 110 kilometers an hour. So,
So the faster you drive, the less efficient the car is. And less range you'll have. But you only needed 2. Did you stop at all 3?
On the way back, we did. We didn't have to, but I wanted to visit the one in Portage la Prairie, and we weren't in a hurry. So just 2 of them on the way there.
So I think broken superchargers or, charging stations that are down are the new range anxiety. You never know. Will the Tesla app tell you? Will it be updated? Will it have accurate information on those chargers?
Yeah, usually on your screen, when you say, I want to go to a supercharger, it'll tell you usually if the station is down. But there's been an issue in the past where it said the Moose Jaw station was down, but it was actually still working. So, there's... It's not 100%. And, of course, I don't have an adapter. There are other chargers along the Trans-Canada Highway for CCS or CHAdeMO, but I don't have an adapter for the Tesla, so I'm kind of stuck.
How much is one of those adapters? $500 or something?
Yeah, the CHAdeMO one is $500 or $600. We're waiting for the CCS adapter that should be coming out soon-ish, and of course, Tesla is announcing massive expansion of the superchargers, which we're going to talk about, and they're going to have to provide adapters for non-Tesla users. That doesn't help me, but
Well, that's interesting that you only had to stop at 2 for that long of a trip with your standard range Model 3 from Tesla, which has a 400 and change range. But that kind of goes down on the highway as you go at faster speeds and less efficient and less regen and all that. But that's encouraging. And I noticed the Supercharger map does not include the Estevan Saskatoon Supercharger, which will allow us to go to the United States from where we are.
Yes, and the Saskatoon Supercharger is under construction. They've started digging the dirt, so that's another important one for where we live, and eventually the route to Edmonton should be covered this year as well, so that's great.
Yeah, man, if I only had a Tesla, Last week, Brian, I asked the listeners to tell us what was going on with them and to get back to me, anything, even what they had for breakfast. Well, I cast my rod and got 1 bite. So we'll have that later in the show. Someone will tell us what they had for breakfast. And I actually pushed for more details. And I still could use more details. I'm a stickler for details.
Yeah. So what else is going on with you this week?
Well, I had the Impossible Burger at home. The missus bought a 2-patty set of Impossible Burgers. I haven't had the Impossible Burger. I've had the other one. What's the other one called?
Beyond Burger.
Beyond Burger. I've had those at A&W and places like that. But I've never... Well, actually, at the cottage last year, we had a hybrid Impossible Burger and real meat.
Oh, yeah, right.
Which was a bizarre concept. It was half real meat, half Impossible. And it was horrible. It was just horrible. I hated it.
The worst of both worlds.
I absolutely hated it. But this week we had my wife cooked one at home for us and for me, her and I. And I had low expectations. I was thinking, I always get cringy. I'm not a good eater, Brian. If I did, I would try new things. I'm not good at trying new things. A very basic palate. I would order off the children's menu at a fancy restaurant, for example, if I could. If it didn't embarrass me, I probably would. So I'm not a good person for that. But I ate it, and I'll be damned, Brian Stockton, if it wasn't the best burger I've ever eaten at home. It was really good, and I thought, damn, this is so good, there's going to be a problem. I'm going to get sick or something.
Yeah.
Well, I got burps. I did have some burps, some weird burps. Which is,
maybe there's more carbs or something.
Which is I'm not quite used to, and one instance of flatulence the next day that was concerning. So, one little episode. But other than that,
did you cook it on the barbecue? Or?
No, we cooked it. I think you need to grill it on a pan. You hit the pan at medium heat and you cook it for 2.5 minutes aside or something like that, and you grill it. You sear it, and that's my wife was talking about doing it in the air fryer just to try something different. No, you got to sear it. It's got to be cooked in a certain way, and I don't know that it's appropriate for barbecue. Although, have you tried one you have tried one at Burger King, right?
I've had the Impossible Whopper, sure, yeah.
The complaint about that.
I thought it was good.
They send it in. I have to do that, but they send it in and on the same place where the regular burgers go,
right?
And that's kind of what my wife did. She cooked my son a burger because we only had 2 Impossible Burgers. She cooked him a real burger, and I tried out my bike light that I've been talking about for the past couple of weeks. It was $28 on Amazon, and it is LED and lithium. And there's one thing that I noticed that I wanted to talk about, and that is a feature on bike lights that you need for electric bikes that you don't necessarily need for regular bikes, and that is it has to shine further because you go faster. Something I hadn't considered. So
yeah, I never thought of that.
I've got a 1,000 lumen bike light, and if they go beyond that, the reviews say it's dubious about their claims of the lumens, the brightness of the light. And sometimes you end up spending $100 for a really bright light that if you're a commuter, you might want to do that. They do detach from the bike. But so I tried it a couple nights, and I enjoyed it because it was so hot here that I thought I've always been a fan of hot summer nights because they're kind of few and far between where we live because it's usually dry. We just had the most humid summer that I can ever remember in history as far as the number of humid days. And that's suddenly a cold front is just blowing in. It's cold and rainy and smoky, and from forest fires and summer ain't coming back. My problem every year, Brian, is that at the end of the year, you know how my swimming pool is heated by solar panels? I have to take the steps out of my swimming pool, which involves going underwater with a mask and taking out sandbags from underneath these big plastic, it looks like a wedding cake, steps.
Yeah.
And I have to do that before it freezes. So I have to calculate. I have to calculate when summer ends. And unfortunately, it may have already ended. It never goes into September. Never. Like you're really pushing it if you're doing it in September, no matter what the year. Because the days get shorter here and,
Okay, you heard it here first. Summer is over.
Summer is over where we are rather abruptly. The whole forecast period is for cold weather. We've had it hot forever and rain when it's too late for the farmers. So, yeah. And also this week, Brian, I learned, we're going to be changing the day we do the podcast episode this fall because your work schedule is going to change when you go back to teaching at the university. And I was listening to the Libsyn podcast, which talks about insider news for podcasts, and he said Tuesday was the best day to release a podcast. And
Really?
Wednesday was second, but Tuesday was good just to be safe, so you can get it out on Wednesday. So when we've actually been broadcasting on the best day, we release every Wednesday. But what day will we be doing it in the fall? I can't remember.
Well, I think we'd sort of decided on Friday, but we could move it to like Monday, record on Monday afternoon and release on Tuesday maybe.
Well, we'll have to see. That's only, 2 weeks away? We've got another Wednesday show before we move.
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
Most people won't notice because you're just looking at your app saying when our latest episode comes in. And by the way, thank you for listening. And we really do appreciate it. And we do like to hear from you. I want to just point out that how you can get a hold of us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, Clean Energy Pod on Twitter, Clean Energy Pod on TikTok. I'm going to go TikTok crazy this fall, Brian. All kinds of promotional stuff on TikTok. And we have a YouTube channel, so check that out as well. And Clean Energy Show is our handle on SpeakPipe, speakpipe.com/Clean Energy Show to leave a voicemail message for us. So, I also watched a video that I tweeted out from our Twitter account, speaking of our Twitter account, from Undecided with Matt Farrell, because he has a good video on fake meat, which I really enjoyed.
So how do you grow meat in a lab? Well, basically you need 3 key ingredients: animal stem cells, a protein-based feed, also known as a growth medium, and a bioreactor, which is just a device where you grow the cells. The cells are generally taken out of the animal through a biopsy under anesthesia, and brewing inside the feed solution, they'll develop into muscle and tissues and will reach an optimal density.
Now, Matt was saying that he's been eating Impossible burgers all the time now at home and loves them. But fake meat, when you replicate texture, is a different story, because that's lab
Yeah,
grown.
and you're replicating the actual cells, too. It is animal cells.
Yeah, and that's only allowed to be sold in Singapore right now, where they have chicken nuggets, which are expensive at one restaurant. I don't know. I haven't heard anything from that, how that's going, or if anyone's died. But it's kind of unappetizing to think about that. But at the same time, holy crap, is it ever sustainable? And I eat a lot of burgers, way too many burgers. And, you know, it's not like the stuff is healthier. They're making it, they're sort of equating the nutritional value of the burger as well as the taste.
Yeah.
So they're not holding back on fat. Although I think there's less saturated fats, so that's kind of a good thing.
Yeah, they can do the unsaturated fats instead.
Right. And it still gives you a good taste. So maybe your heart doesn't clog as fast. I don't know.
Yeah.
So we're all hoping.
There's been a lot of discussion lately, too, about, greenhouse farming. Like, we really, as a society, need to get into more greenhouse farming. Like, ideally, we should probably plant trees on all the farmland that we have and then move a lot of that farming into, controlled environments like greenhouses. So, as the weather changes, farming is going to get more difficult. So more, the more we can control, the better. And that includes, making meat, perhaps, in a petri dish.
Yeah. And our theory on the show is that it's going to get cheaper and disruptive for economic reasons. And they are talking 2035 and early 2030s where this stuff starts to get cheaper. And young people, as I suspected, the younger generation, your under 35s, are having a preference for this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of eating meat. Like, I worked on a Soviet Union documentary on agriculture in, 1989. So I spent the summer... What?
If it was the Soviet Union, it would have had to have been a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, Brian. It was 1989, and I'm not sure that they didn't implant something in me to spy on me. It was a weird thing, but I did go around to different farms, and then I saw what happens to the farms at the end of the shoot, because we spent a day in a slaughterhouse, like a whole freaking day. And to the point where I almost became a vegetarian. Had I not disliked vegetables, I probably would have become a vegetarian.
That tends to be a barrier to vegetarianism.
I was actually panicking. I was thinking, I don't like vegetables. I'm going to die. So I went and forced a McDonald's cheeseburger in me, but it didn't go down very well.
Yeah.
I just forced it. I literally made myself eat one. And So yesterday, I took my son for an oil change, This is something you newbies may not realize you do not need to do with an electric car. Oil in a combustion vehicle is to deal with the friction of the moving parts of the explosions that move the pistons up and down. And you have all this oil in there, and it has to be changed. If you don't change it, it can break the seals and wreck your engine. And it's something I've always hated. Always hated before I had an electric car, and boy, do I hate it now that I have an electric car and I had to take my son for his oil change. And here's my pet peeve that really makes me mad, that really boils my blood. They gave us a sticker for 5,000 kilometers to get it changed to 5,000 kilometers. And Mr. Lube used to do that. I don't think they do that anymore, but we went to the real Canadian oil change place, a different company. And the thing is I bought synthetic oil, which is supposed to last for a year, like 16,000 kilometers, 10,000 miles. It's supposed to last for a year, basically a year of normal driving. And they gave me a 5,000 3-month.
Yeah.
There's people out there who assume that that's true, and it's not, and it makes me mad. Because there's a big difference between 5,000 kilometers and 16,000 kilometers. Big difference.
Yeah.
Even if
you
you're
just
not good at
never
math.
know, because you don't want to harm your engine.
Right.
But obviously, they might make more money if you come back sooner.
But I was telling my son, even if you owned a vintage $10 million Porsche that you were babying, you probably wouldn't change the oil that often. More frequently than normal, but not that often. It's absurd. Yeah. And, there's all I have to find an air filter for my Prius, which I can't find. Canadian Tire didn't carry them for the engine air filter. All these things that combustion vehicles have, I don't care for them. And, some of the oil, the oil was starting to leak at the bottom of the car. Plus, we got his tire fixed. So we bought this used car from a friend who didn't drive it very much. So it's like 180,000 kilometers for a 20-year-old car, Honda Civic. And we found out the tires are 11 years old. So they all may blow at any time.
Yeah.
But they've got 60% tread life left in them. And they're 11 years old. So it's just such a good deal to buy that car. But the tires might explode.
If a car has been parked for a long time, you're actually supposed to move it every once in a while because the tires can sort of develop flat spots on them.
Yeah.
And so if it sat for too long without being moved, then once you get on the highway, they could all explode.
Yeah, and I have to do that with my trailer tires because it just sits with a very heavy load on it, and it's like an 80 pounds pressure situation. So that's always scary. You never want to blow a tire on a trailer. I saw one blow on a trailer in the mountains when I was a kid, and the trailer started bouncing around, and it's not a good situation when the trailer bounces around behind a vehicle that it's pulling it in a mountain pass. So you wanted to say something about YouTube.
Right. So we had a big update last week. We had a live update of checking the views on the video of my car, my Tesla Model 3, getting clean. So my car got cleaned by the Detail Geek, who's the biggest detailing channel on YouTube. And last week we had a live update because it was ticking over 1 million views. 1 million people have watched my car getting clean. And so that's kind of fun. And we did a live update and it actually went over 1 million. But I was kind of lamenting as a filmmaker. I make my own films. I have a YouTube channel. I don't put a lot on there. But I was just lamenting how, I could never expect to have 1 million views of my work as a filmmaker. So lo and behold, I checked it on my YouTube channel, and there's a viral video that I made a couple of years ago called Same Joke, Different Shows, where I took clips from the late night comedy shows, the American shows like Colbert and Seth Meyers, and I started collecting the repeated jokes because sometimes you'll get the exact same joke, and we've talked about this before on the show. And so it was a hell of a lot of work collecting these over many, many months. And it went viral a couple of years ago, but it sort of petered out at about 100,000 views. But anyway, I checked it on the channel, and we're actually going to have another live update of YouTube views because I checked it just before the show, and it's at 399,616 views. So I'm going to hit the refresh again.
All right, let's roll the music.
And, yes, roll the music. And I hit the refresh button. 399,638 views. So So it has slowed down. It peaked about 2 weeks ago, like this latest run. I don't know. They changed the algorithm or something, and it just went viral again.
Yeah.
And it started about a month ago. It peaked about 2 weeks ago, and it's up to 400,000 views. If you want to check out, my viral video, it's called Same Joke, Different Shows on YouTube. And it's the Brian Stockton YouTube channel.
Well, Brian, we better get to the stories of the week. I wanted to talk about the UN climate report.
They explicitly say, we're not in the business of what government policies should be, but reading between the lines, what they're saying is we've got to get to basically, so we're not putting any carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And to do that means total transformation of the way energy is produced in the world and the way transportation is done in the world, which currently is done primarily through the burning of fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas, things like that.
So that was a clip from The Daily from the New York Times, the other popular podcast, aside from us. Often mentioned in the same sentence, both of us. Often. Sure. Basically, the solution to the climate crisis is what we talk about here on the show every week. So tell your friends. Listen to our show. This is what we do. We don't say that it's necessarily. We're just very hopeful, and we cover what's going on. It's a be-all, end-all of climate reports, this one. You often hear about climate reports, so it gets confusing. Well, this was a big one. Yeah. This is one that hasn't been done in 20 years by the UN. And they had 200 scientists, 195 countries had to approve line by line this report. So even the bad countries had to approve every line of this report as being factual. So the first big takeaway is that it leaves no doubt that all the climate is changing because of humans. So there's no doubt. Before there was a strong indication, now it's humans.
No doubt.
And then this doesn't get covered by the media very well because the media is tired of it. They're tired of climate reports, and they're not really, willing to blow the whistle and pull the alarm on this one more than a little bit of coverage. So the coverage of it faded away, which climate scientists are angry about and upset. Understanding of the climate science is improving, Brian, over the last 20 years because they have more buoys in the ocean, so more data. They're collecting more data. Computers are much more powerful, so they're able to run more climate models. You run a climate model with A input and see what happens, and B input and see what happens, and they can do more of that. The second takeaway is that even if we cut all emissions today, and we've talked about this before in the show, we're suddenly green today, no more emissions today, middle of August 2021. It still takes 30 years for anything to really change. And for most people, especially those in the powerful decision-making positions, that's the rest of their life. I will be 84 in 30 years. Yeah. Probably a well-aged corpse by then, but let's say I live to 84. What am I going to be doing? Probably not a lot. And what amazes me is people don't think about their children or grandchildren. They just think, it's my pet peeve. My climate pet peeve is that people don't give a crap about their offspring and their lineage going down. They're more concerned about themselves. Well, we spent a whole summer with dark skies and breathing smoke because climate change is 1.1 degrees in 30 years by 2050. We're hoping we're going to have to do a lot of work to keep it at 1.5, which is, God knows what the climate is going to be doing even then at 1.5. Let alone if we screw up. If we screw up, Brian, it's 2 or 3. Yeah. And then, the ocean currents stop moving. The ocean turns to acid, becomes alkaline. And what do my kids do? Will my kids see a blue sky in summer if they live where we live? I mean, all of North America is covered in smoke, right? Yeah,
no, long-term goals have never been the strength of governments. And because of our election cycles, it's always short-term thinking. I just got my electricity bill the other day from our local utility, and I have solar, so I just pay the minimum, which is around $27 a month. And but this month it was $11.70 because of the economic recovery rebate that they've slid into there. And this is a Crown Corporation utility. It's basically owned and run by the government. And so, it's nice to get a smaller bill. But I don't know, is that going to help anything.
It's not going to help a damn thing. It's not. It's the carbon tax that we have in Canada now.
We should all be paying more on
We should
our
be paying more on
bills.
everything, particularly gas, which the Prius costs $50 to fill up. We're used to like 36. Even if it was running on fumes, it's now $50. So now we're feeling, even I with a hybrid is thinking, yeah, I wish that was electric, because I don't like paying $50. And yet the Yahoos around here are driving SUVs and pickup trucks, and then what are they spending? They're spending $150 on a tank or something like that.
Oh, yeah. No, a lot of those big trucks, it's absolutely $150 to fill for sure.
And that's no fun. Nobody wants to pay that.
No one likes that.
Nobody adds up the $150 a week you're spending on your pickup truck, or the $300 a month, $350 a month, or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, and I always think about that with my parents, because they were always very frugal. My parents were very frugal, except when it comes to fossil fuels. We always had these big V8 gas guzzling cars in the 70s that just took tons of gas, and somehow that never bothered them, but all the other spending did.
So what's going to happen? Even if we work hard, and even if Tony Seba's right and the economics are there to disrupt fossil fuels, it has to be a death knell, though. The UN Secretary General said this has to be the death knell for fossil fuels. And nobody around here is going to like to hear that. We live in oil country in Canada. Canada is a petro-state. There's lots of petro-states going around, including the United States and certainly Russia and the Middle East. It takes decades for CO2 to break down in the atmosphere. That's why this thing just doesn't happen overnight. And each decade will get hotter than the last. So whatever we have, nobody really, this is what we talked about before. I never expected, the promises of climate change were maybe we'll see some changes in 2050, certainly by the end of the century. But we're seeing it now. And they've proven now, by running these models that they can run quickly, that this heat dome never would have happened. In fact, my son was telling me last night that he was reading about it, and they predicted it a few years ago for the end of the 2020s. A heat dome like that would happen. And then it happened at the beginning of the 2020s. So it's already, it's amazing that they can predict things like that, and now it's faster. Everything's faster. And I think your average person, even climate deniers, are saying, well, this is, we've never experienced this.
Yeah, and as we often say, one extreme weather event doesn't necessarily mean anything, but you're absolutely right. I did not expect it to seem so obvious, because it seems really obvious that the climate is different.
Yeah, and the fact that the Arctic's melting, the fact that we will have an ice-free Arctic for a year here and there, and a few years from now, a couple decades from now, that's not fun. That's not normal. What's Santa Claus going to do? They need that ice up there.
Exactly.
So it's a downer. I'm sorry, people, but it's a downer. However, there is a lot of hope, and that's what they tried to say in the report, is that there is hope. But yeah, bad things will happen more often. These things will happen more often. My son also pointed out that this is one of the deadliest heat waves in North American history. The most people, and they're still counting. They're still going to discover that, more than 3,000 people have died. It sounds like already confirmed.
No, and imagine the past where almost nobody had air conditioning,
yes.
And now lots of people have air conditioning, and it was still the deadliest.
Some of that did happen because it happened in a place where people don't have air conditioning.
Don't have it traditionally.
Bad things will happen more often, and we'll see, like a once-a-year flood happen 4 or 5 times a year, like even places that have a nuisance flood. They're talking about that happening 4 or 5 times a year. So, that's a big nuisance. Once a year is a nuisance flood. 4 or 5 times a year, every couple of months or so, is bad. So the third takeaway is that the world has a window of opportunity to act immediately. And again, what we talk about on this show, the whole theme of our show is technology and how it can be used to save the planet. And I've always been a fan of that. Brian's always been a fan of that. But we need deep cuts. The whole world has to do this right now. No waiting. So, yeah, 1.1 degrees Celsius is what we've warmed. That's a couple degrees Fahrenheit for you Yankees. And if we get to 1.5 in 30 years, that's going to happen no matter what. The point is we need to keep it there. Just to have a worse climate than we have today, and today's climate ain't fun. We have to cut emissions rapidly over 20 years, and because 2 or 3 degrees, Brian Stockton, will kill us all. And we want humanity not to have to go to Mars. It's fun to go to have Mars and have a backup planet, Elon, but in case there's an asteroid or a new pandemic, maybe the pandemic will kill us. It seems to never go away and keep getting worse. But I think I'm going to go back to wearing a mask in public. I've gone a few places without a mask because nobody's wearing them, so I feel like. But at the same time, I like my anonymity.
No, what I will say, in Winnipeg, there was much more mask use
Is that right?
than there was here because of the messaging. Their messaging has been stronger over in Manitoba than here. So, it's different from city to city how much people are wearing masks.
Brian, what is the oil and gas sector doing that's going to raise my blood pressure this week?
Okay, well, let's get all of the bad news out of the
cleanse.
way with this story. So we talked about a couple of months ago how the oil and gas industry were paying Instagram influencers and how they were paying people to pretend they were concerned citizens and to protest. Well, sadly, another such story has come out here. The Los Angeles Times and a news outlet called Floodlight, in partnership with The Guardian, did an investigation and found that in 2017, at least 20 locals were organized by Method Campaign Services to push for near-zero emissions trucks at the ports in Los Angeles. So the ports in L.A. Create a lot of pollution, and so there's a move to get rid of diesel trucks and things like that in the port. So they paid a bunch of people to go to these city council meetings and stuff, and to push for near zero emission trucks, which are natural gas trucks. So it's been found out that the natural gas industry paid for people to show up to be concerned citizens, and they didn't even know who they were working for. They were sort of hired from an ad in a newspaper that it was sort of like, green, get hired as a green activist.
I'm going to throw up. I'm past high blood pressure, Brian. This is now gastro. This is a gastro event we're having here. I'm going to throw up. This is just sickening.
Yeah, I know that this bothers you and raises your blood
My
pressure.
blood pressure can't even go up. My body is just calling it quits. Every cell in it is just, what the living hell? I mean, come on.
Yeah, and isn't there laws against this sort of thing, having people pretend that they're concerned
I'm
citizens?
sick of hearing these stories. I thought this was over with the Trump era. Come on.
Well, it's from 2017, so it is, technically old news.
This did happen before, and now it's exposed. I don't know what to say to that other than, the hydrogen is seen by many as clean, and it's not. It's an excuse to use more fossil fuels, which brings me to something I wanted to talk about this week. Billions of dollars from the bipartisan bill in the States for the infrastructure bill has been teed up to fund hydrogen. Nikola, of all people, the corrupt-run company from, what's his name, who got charged last week, or did he go to jail? I can't remember.
I'm not sure, but probably winding its way through the courts.
Refer to last week's episode for more details. A peer-reviewed study is out on the climate effects of hydrogen. This came out a few days ago. It casts doubt on the role of hydrogen tackling greenhouse gas emissions that are the driver of catastrophic global warming. And the main stumbling block was that most hydrogen used today is extracted from natural gas in a process that requires a lot of energy. And emits vast amounts of carbon dioxide. Producing natural gas also releases methane, which is worse than carbon dioxide. If you're a climate geek, it warms the planet even more than carbon dioxide, which is why we got to get rid of cows and start eating Impossible burgers. But then I burp. But I don't think that my burping is as bad as the cow burps, frankly, although we'll have to measure that scientifically. It's a particularly potent greenhouse gas, Brian. So the natural gas industry has proposed capturing that carbon dioxide and making it, it promotes blue hydrogen. Yeah. So if they make hydrogen from natural gas and capture the emissions, then they call that blue hydrogen. But even that fuel, according to the study, still emits more across its entire supply chain than simply burning natural gas, which makes me increasingly skeptical about carbon capture, according to the paper. And we have carbon capture going on here at a power plant, at a coal plant, one of the first in the world, one of the biggest things in the world.
It's better than nothing because it is a coal plant and they're burning coal, and they are thankfully capturing some of the carbon, but it's probably not a great idea and cost a ton of money, and they probably just should have put up some solar panels and batteries. But hydrogen at least has the potential to be clean. It can be made with clean electricity from solar panels or wind or whatever. But yeah, as you say, it's just not done. And there's so many more steps along the chain. So if you have to transport the hydrogen to a hydrogen station, that could potentially be a fossil fuel burning truck. So we're just too far away from hydrogen possibly working as a green alternative.
Brian, it's time for What Do You Think?
What do you think?
This is the weekly segment where I ask Brian what he thinks about stories that I don't understand. And for some reason, Brian, whenever I put this together, they always seem to be Tesla stories. Now, you are a heavy Tesla investor, and Tesla stock has been down in recent weeks, right?
Yeah, it perked up a little. It's down again, but yes, I am a Tesla shareholder.
So the Tesla investigation, CNN was covering the Tesla investigation by the was the National Highway Safety Institute or something.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, so this happens quite frequently. If there's, really any kind of crash, it can be investigated by the NHTSA, the agency in the U.S. So every time Tesla gets investigated, it makes headlines, whereas anytime, Ford or somebody else gets investigated, it doesn't make headlines. So this one is specifically to do with Teslas on autopilot running into emergency vehicles like fire trucks and ambulances. And it has apparently happened something like 11 times.
It's a lot.
But, which is a lot, and this is concerning. And it has been a known problem of Tesla autopilot of sometimes running into parked vehicles, parked cars. It's a slight blind spot in the system, but it's the blind spot in a lot of cars. Like we have a normal gas car with cruise control. It doesn't stop or slow down for anything. So if you're not paying attention, you will absolutely run into a fire truck or whatever. So they're just trying to determine if Tesla could be doing something better with these accidents. But, as we said before, they are by and large the safest cars you can buy in terms of, crash safety. If you do get into a crash, they're very safe. And, typically the autopilot, the active safety features are very, very good. And, they have lower accidents overall compared to other vehicles.
So on our 2017 Toyota Prius, we have a standard radar cruise control. So if you follow behind a vehicle, it will, stay a certain distance, which was nice in California because I'm not used to driving on the freeways there. And they try to drive close so I could adjust it so I drove close to the guy in front of me, but still knew that it would change rapidly and react faster than I could because I was worried that, one split second of looking at a palm tree and I'd be dead or something. So I didn't want to be that dead guy. But also when I first tried it out, I assumed it stopped at red lights. So we were on a highway and then the highway was no more. And then there was the first traffic light coming into the city and there was a car stop there. Well, if the car is not moving, it doesn't do anything. So it did not stop. It just flashed this big red screen that said, stop. And it will apparently apply the brakes and reduce the horribleness of an accident, but it doesn't reduce the accident because they figure that's too intrusive. And I think that's Tesla's problem, too. Whenever they see a white truck, they think they see something, they're not sure, they don't want to hit the brakes. Otherwise, they'd be hitting the brakes all the time for false things. So I'm just wondering if that has anything to do with it.
Well, yeah, and the other issue that is probably part of the investigation is Tesla could be doing a better job of making sure the drivers are paying attention. So there's a nag feature where you've got to move the steering wheel every once in a while. but they've only recently started using the interior camera in the Tesla. Every Tesla has an interior camera, and they're just now starting to use that to monitor driver attention. So with the newest software, if you're just not staring at the road for a long time, it's going to know. The car's going to know.
Right. And Tesla has started giving back supercharger access to salvaged vehicles. They never used to let you charge if you got a salvaged Tesla.
Oh, yeah. That update, that's already been taken away.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was just a mistake.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, Foxconn is planning to build EV plants in the United States. I know you're an avid Apple person. Foxconn makes the Apple stuff in China. And they're planning on opening U.S. electric vehicle plants to offset slowing smartphone industry sales. Thoughts? Any thoughts?
No, I mean, it makes sense. They're a very large company that's very good at manufacturing. So I wasn't aware that, mobile phones were slowing down. That doesn't seem right.
Is the Apple electric vehicle still happening? I mean, is there any news on that?
No news on that recently. I'd be still surprised if something happens. They would have to be securing massive battery supply, and we've heard nothing about that. So no time soon, I don't think.
Wouldn't Foxconn be a good match then for, making, they make the iPhone?
Well, it's possible. I mean, maybe this is related to an Apple car. I don't know.
All right, that's been another edition of What Do You Think?
What do you think?
GM has confirmed it plans to replace all 68,667 Chevrolet Bolt EV electric car batteries that have potentially defective modules. Brian Stockton, what do you have on that?
Yeah, well, this is apparently going to cost them around $1 billion. This is a very big recall. It's very similar to the one that Hyundai has had to do. They've done a similar recall in Kona EV and Ioniq vehicles. So it has to do with the LG batteries inside, like the modules themselves, I think, not necessarily the whole pack. But they've found out that there was some manufacturing defects on, it's not every single Chevy Bolt that's been sold, but it is enough of them to cost $1 billion.
Wow, that is not good for EV progress and profitability on GM's part. And you'd think that they'd get the battery chemistries, because they do. If they're wrong, then this is a very expensive thing to recall. On the other hand, if you're an owner, you get a new battery pack. There's nothing wrong with the old battery pack, other than the fact that there was a 1 in 100,000 chance it might go on fire or something, or 1 in 10,000.
No, and the new battery is probably going to have even better range.
Right?
But yeah, it was some kind of a defect in the way the tabs were being made in the batteries or something. It was a manufacturing defect.
Well, it's a good thing that they didn't sell even more, because there'd be even a bigger problem. So it's the second recall. There was one announced in July of the 2017-19 Bolt EV due to a manufacturing defect. Is this the newer Bolts, like the post-2019 that we're talking about, or do we know?
I think it's way back to 2017, 2018, 2019.
So that's the same one, and it's a manufacturing defect. So this is another recall of even more vehicles. They're expanding it, I guess. So, yeah, that's I don't know. It's going to take a long time, because those batteries are heavy and expensive to ship to the dealers, and it's daunting. So,
Tesla is planning on an even faster expansion of the Supercharger network. So they've added a lot of job postings. So they are already expanding the Supercharger network very, very fast. But they've had all kinds of job postings in the U.S., Phoenix, Denver, Albuquerque, Oklahoma City, Austin. And they've updated their map of where they plan to put in chargers. And it's an absolutely massive expansion, and it probably has to do with their recent announcement that they're going to open up the Supercharger network to non-Tesla vehicles, and probably has something to do with the $7.5 billion in EV infrastructure funding that has just come through in this build that we were talking about in the U.S. They're going to spend a lot of money on charging infrastructure for electric cars. And now that Tesla is going to be open to all vehicles, they're going to be eligible for some of that funding.
Okay. Well, let's get to the letters before we run out of time. Last week, I asked our listeners to let us know what's going on in your life. What are you thinking? What do you like? What do you think of the show? What length of the show should our show be? Any thoughts on that? And if not, just tell us what you had for breakfast. So Paul writes, "Hi guys, I had toast for breakfast." Well, I did not accept that. That doesn't tell me anything. Was it toast? Was it toasted bread and nothing else? What kind of bread was it? So I pushed on that. I went back and I said, "Paul, let's hear what was it." And he says, "I had butter and red currant jam with a glass of apple juice." A glass of apple juice, perhaps too much information. But still no idea what kind of bread he's using. It could be sourdough for all I know, Brian. It could be anything. It could be rye. There's a lot of different breads out there. It could be something seedy. So I don't know what red currant jam is. Do you?
Well, I assume it's jam made from red currants.
I don't know what red currants are.
It's a berry. It's a kind of berry.
It's a kind of berry. The red currant, a member of the genus Ribes in the gooseberry family. It is a native across Europe. The species is widely cultivated and has escaped into the wild in many regions. It's a deciduous shrub normally growing 1 to 1.5 meters, occasionally 7 feet tall. 5 lob leaves arranged spirally on the stems. The flowers are inconspicuously yellow-green. So there's what we have on the...
Wow, I'm so glad we got to the bottom of that.
Yes, the red berry makes it onto the podcast. Not the red berry, but the red currant.
Why wasn't that our lead story?
I don't know why, but when I moved to Toronto in 97, 98, I was happy that they had craft grape jelly because it reminded me of my childhood. But it was like expensive. It's at the expensive grocery store. It's a small jar. But now on Amazon, occasionally you can buy the little packets that they serve in diners. In restaurants.
Ooh.
So I actually ordered a pack at great expense just so I could try it again. But I've moved on. I found a better jelly to get in with that. Brian, it's time, as we end the show once again, for the lightning round.
The Clean Energy Show Lightning Round.
We have to get out under an hour or I wear coal on my face. Italy's plug-in vehicle sales break past 10% mark in July. Congratulations, Italy. 10% EV sales, Brian.
There was more news from Norway. It's going higher and higher for a percentage of electric vehicles in Norway.
Is that right? Okay, good news, good news. We like good news. We like the end of showing good news. Waymo has just tweeted that they are building a dedicated trucking hub in Dallas to serve as a central launch point for our Southwest U.S. testing and freight transport. Now, Waymo is the Google spinoff that does self-driving. So we're talking robo semi-trucks here, Brian Stockton. They're going ahead with it. Waymo is going ahead with robo semis, which is a frightening aspect because what movie had... robo semis in them flying by? There was a sci-fi film. I forget.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, I can't remember. If you know, listeners, which film that was, let me know, and I'll mention it on next week's show. It was from a few years ago. We're partnering with Ryder to support our fleet maintenance. So Ryder is going to be their fleet maintenance people. They deal with current semi-trailers. So that's interesting. And of course, if it becomes electrified, then good. Driverless, well, it's bad for jobs, but they are having a hard time finding drivers for these vehicles. Anyway, so, okay, oil producers used Facebook to counter Biden's climate plan. This is another story of heart palpitations on James. Oil producers have used Facebook. It doesn't make you love oil, Brian. I mean, the oil has problems, but when they do crap like this, damn them to hell, I say. Screw you. I hope you go out of business, you bastards.
And if you want to spread false information, your best bet is probably
Facebook is a good place to do it. Loblaws, the Canadian grocer retailer, where was the place that had my craft grape jelly in 1998, expands electric semi-testing in British Columbia. So they are testing electric semis, I believe, they're from Chinese manufacturers. At least they were before in the earlier part of the program. And I know they ordered Tesla semis, so we're still waiting on that. The Tesla Model Y pre-production may be starting at the Gigafactory in Texas this week, Brian. True story or not?
Wow, that's big.
Is that going to happen? Is that going to happen?
Yeah, it's we'll get some by the end of the year, I think, both in Texas and maybe even Berlin too.
India news. Hello, India, one of our biggest supporters. A duo of camouflaged Tesla Model 3 electric cars was spotted testing in India as the automaker is rumored to soon be entering the market. This is electric, and this is breaking news hot off the press, Brian. That's good news.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we got here. 100,000 Canadians have now benefited from the iZEV program, the EV rebate. 100,000 people in Canada have taken the $5,000 and bought an electric car. Sometimes it's $2,500 if it's not a full electric car. But yeah, that's good. Nikola, like I said earlier, got $2 million from the U.S. Department of Energy as a grant for hydrogen refueling tech. Will they waste that $2 million? It has remained to be seen. Pizza Hut will use artificial intelligence to recommend what pizza to get. Have you seen that?
No,
it was a big story on the news the other day. Based on the weather, they're using artificial intelligence to predict what kind of pizza you might like based on the weather, which is why I mentioned it on the show.
Okay. I mean, I guess if they have the data from the past and they know what people ordered on certain days, then yeah, that might actually
work.
When
it's rainy, maybe I like a little bit of pepperoni and mushroom, something like that. When it's sunny, maybe I'll go with a pineapple, which some people find offensive on pizzas, but it's very common here. AI Day is coming, Brian Stockton, is it not? When's it coming?
Yeah, that is tomorrow, I believe. Tesla AI Day, so we will have coverage of that next week.
What do you anticipate? Do you think we'll get anything new? It'll be interesting. How long will it be for those people who are considering watching it?
It'll probably be a couple hours long, and it'll probably be a bit dense and a bit technical. But yeah, we are expecting at least some kind of surprise or some kind of hint, because they mentioned in the invite about technology beyond their vehicle fleet. So that's the little teaser. So we are expecting them to, nothing immediate, nothing that's going to happen right away, but we are expecting them to tease us with where else they're going to take their artificial intelligence technology.
Asad Razuk is somebody I follow on Twitter, and sometimes every week throughout the course of our 18 months doing the show, he has a tweet every week where he summarizes the good climate news every week. Sometimes I mention it, and I'd like to end the show on it because it's a positive thing. Guess what he tweeted this week? Good climate news this week, none. He couldn't find. He said that's for the first time in over 2 years of this Good Climate News This Week series. There are no good climate news this week whatsoever. He says, I really tried and looked far and wide. Sorry. So let's get it together, people. Pressure your leaders to get working on climate change. We'll see you again next week on the Clean Energy Show. Please join us for another edition as we talk about the latest in clean energy and transportation.
See you next week.